For 20 years, Victoria Hale ruled the business world from a wheelchair. People called her the Iron CEO because nothing ever seemed to break her. At just 28 years old, she had survived a terrible car accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors told her she would never walk again, and from that day forward, Victoria buried every piece of weakness deep inside herself. She built Hale Innovations into a billion-dollar company, became one of the most feared executives in the country, and learned to hide her pain behind cold eyes and sharp words. Employees respected her, investors admired her, and the media worshipped her success story. But every night, when the giant glass walls of her penthouse reflected her lonely silhouette sitting in that wheelchair, Victoria knew the truth. Money had bought her power, but it had never brought her peace. She had no family left, no close friends, and no one who truly cared whether she smiled or cried. Her entire life had become meetings, contracts, and endless silence. One rainy Thursday afternoon, during one of the biggest merger meetings in company history, Victoria sat at the head of a massive conference table while executives nervously waited for her decision. Outside, thunder shook the city skyline. Inside, the atmosphere was even colder. "We proceed tomorrow," Victoria said firmly, signing the final papers without hesitation. But before the meeting could end, the conference room doors suddenly opened. A soaked delivery driver stepped inside carrying several food bags. The assistants immediately looked annoyed. "You're not supposed to come in here," one snapped. The young man apologized quickly. "Sorry, the receptionist told me to bring these directly up because the elevators were backed up." Victoria barely looked at him at first. To her, he was just another invisible worker in a city full of invisible people. But then something strange happened. As the driver handed the food bags to the staff, a small photograph slipped from his jacket pocket and landed near Victoria's wheelchair. She glanced down and saw a picture of the driver holding a little girl in a hospital bed. The child had no hair and was smiling weakly while holding his hand. For the first time that entire day, Victoria's cold expression softened slightly. "Your daughter?" she asked quietly. The room fell silent because nobody was used to hearing their CEO ask personal questions. The driver nodded. "Yes, her name's Lily. She's 8. Victoria noticed the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that only came from years of struggling. "She's sick?" she asked. The man hesitated before answering. "Leukemia. Treatment's expensive, but she's fighting hard." One of the executives impatiently interrupted. "Miss Hale, should we continue?" But Victoria kept staring at the photograph. Something about that little girl's smile reminded her of herself before the accident, before life became dark and empty. "What's your name?" she asked the driver. "Daniel Brooks." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for the delivery, Mr. Brooks." Daniel smiled politely and turned to leave, but just before he reached the door, Victoria suddenly felt an intense sharp pain shoot through her legs. It was so unexpected that she gasped softly. For 20 years she had felt almost nothing below her waist. Never pain. Never movement. Nothing. She gripped the armrests tightly as another strange sensation traveled through her right foot. One of the executives noticed her pale face. "Miss Hale, are you all right?" Victoria looked down in shock. Her toes had moved. Barely. But they moved. The entire room froze as she whispered words she never imagined saying again. "I felt something." Doctors were called immediately. Meetings were cancelled. Tests lasted for hours. Specialists couldn't explain it. Some believed it was a temporary nerve reaction. Others called it impossible. But Victoria couldn't stop thinking about the exact moment it happened. The moment Daniel Brooks entered the room. Over the next few days, she secretly asked her assistant to investigate him. What she discovered stunned her. Daniel was a widowed single father working 3 delivery jobs to keep his daughter alive. He slept only 4 hours a night, sold his car to pay hospital bills, and still somehow managed to volunteer at the children's cancer ward every weekend to encourage other sick kids. Everyone described him the same way, kind, patient, and impossibly hopeful. Victoria didn't understand it. How could a man with so little still carry so much light inside him? Curiosity turned into obsession. A week later, Victoria ordered her driver to take her to the hospital where Lily was receiving treatment. She didn't tell anyone why. When she arrived, she saw Daniel sitting beside Lily's bed, making funny puppet voices with paper bags just to hear his daughter laugh. That laugh echoed through the hallway like sunlight entering a dark room. Victoria watched silently from the doorway until Lily noticed her wheelchair. "Daddy," Lily whispered excitedly, "she looks like a queen." Daniel turned around in surprise. "Miss Hale." Victoria suddenly felt awkward, something she almost never experienced. "I was nearby," she lied softly. Lily smiled brightly. "Do you want to see my drawings?" Before Victoria could answer, Lily began showing her colorful pictures of castles, gardens, and people dancing in the rain. Every drawing showed people standing tall no matter how broken they looked. One picture showed a woman rising from a wheelchair surrounded by light. Victoria stared at it speechlessly. "That's you," Lily said innocently. "Daddy says miracles happen when people stop feeling alone." Those words hit Victoria harder than any business deal ever had. For years she believed strength meant shutting everyone out. But this little girl and her exhausted father somehow carried more courage than anyone she had ever known. Over the following months, Victoria began visiting regularly. At first she brought expensive gifts and paid for Lily's treatments anonymously, but eventually she stopped hiding it. She started talking with Daniel for hours about life, fear, loss, and hope. He never treated her like a billionaire CEO. He treated her like a human being. Slowly, something inside Victoria changed. And strangely, so did her body. With therapy and determination, tiny movements became larger ones. Doctors were stunned by her progress. Headlines exploded across the country. Miracle CEO defies paralysis after 20 years. But Victoria knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was connection. It was finally allowing herself to feel alive again. One evening, after months of painful rehabilitation, Victoria stood for the first time with support bars while Daniel and Lily watched. Tears filled her eyes as her trembling legs held her weight for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds that felt bigger than 20 lost years. Lily clapped excitedly while Daniel smiled proudly. "You did it," he whispered. Victoria looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "No," she replied softly. "You did." Months later, Victoria shocked the business world again by announcing a massive foundation dedicated to helping single parents and children battling cancer. She placed Daniel in charge of the entire project despite his lack of corporate experience. Investors questioned her decision, but Victoria simply answered, "The best leaders are people who never stopped caring." Lily eventually entered remission, and for the first time in decades, Victoria's mansion no longer felt empty. Laughter filled its halls. Hope replaced silence. And though Victoria's recovery remained slow, she no longer measured life by how far she could walk. She measured it by how deeply she could love, help, and live. Sometimes the people who change our lives don't arrive in limousines or private jets. Sometimes they arrive soaked in rain, carrying delivery bags, exhausted from fighting battles nobody sees. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories that remind us miracles still exist in ordinary people.